the Fediverse. So the Fediverse is effectively decentralized social media. If you're trying to understand it, that's kind of the easiest wrapper to put around it. It uses an open protocol. So think using something like email would be an open protocol. If you're on Outlook, you can email Gmail accounts, but that is not the case in social media. Like if you're on Facebook, you can't direct message someone on LinkedIn. So, or X or any of those other ones, except for Instagram. That's an exception because Facebook and Instagram are both under Meta. So when you think of this as like an open protocol, this means that you could post on one place and those users can interact across to each other. So it's kind of an interconnected network of different social media platforms. And that's really what creates the Fediverse, is it's interconnected, I guess, little like social media universes. So it's a federated metaverse. It's kind of the way that term came about. And then users can interact across the platform. So if you make one post on one platform, that post can be seen on different platforms. So imagine if you could post on Facebook and that could show up on X, that would be kind of what you can do with the Fediverse. You can post on one and that can show up on more on the other ones. And then users get a lot more control this way because you don't just have one platform that's dictating a lot of the rules here. Since it's like, you know how you can log into your inbox in multiple different email systems? So you could basically log into your inbox on a different mailing app, and maybe you're typically in the Google Workspace place, but you can use your mail in Outlook, or you can use your mail in the Apple Mail app, or however you're set up. But basically, you can kind of do that, but for social media. And so this is Blue Sky, and there's a number of other ones, because what this allows us to do is basically have more smaller social media platforms that are tailored to what we want, not just, a couple platforms that have very, very strict rules. And it gets around this issue with social media platforms, which is if you start a new social media platform that maybe people want and there's no one there, you've effectively made this ghost town. So you need people to populate it first. And this is how we get around that, where you can have these smaller social media platforms that are tailored, because that ghost town gets populated with the open protocol. All right. Is that a good intro?
No, yeah, I think it was, I really like the email analogy. I think that is like a very good, clear explanation of how it works. And I would also say, I think it's good on our side to understand how it works, but I also think, like, from that end user perspective, it's social media. They want it to give them a similar value to what they're expecting from a social media platform. And that's sort of the lens that, at least as a marketer, I'm still using to look through, like, should we be on Mastodon or Blue Sky or Redno or like all of these other things. And I think it kind of still comes down to like understanding what is your audience doing? What are brands in your space doing? And I will say, I think that critical mass that you mentioned is ultimately, that's like the most important part of a social. There's no point being in a social space if no one's there. As a user, I'm not going to join it. I think I downloaded like 4 different apps when some things blew up, and it was like, I'm going to try a non-X platform, and none of my friends used it. So it wasn't fun. Like, I'm not going to just upload photos for myself. I already could do that. But I will say, I think Blue Sky is finally getting some of that critical mass. I think there's still definitely a lot of progress that needs to be made for it to compete at the level of a Meta platform. But I think if you were looking between X and Blue Sky, there's value on Blue Sky that I would say X is losing.
How does Threads kind of fit in to this picture of X, Blue Sky? Like, where does that all sit?
Great question.
Yeah, so one of the things to add here is actually Threads does work with the open protocol. So you can actually access some of the content from Blue Sky in Threads, at least pretty sure that's the case. And that is one of the ways that you could start to see this change, is if some of these bigger platforms actually start to adopt the open protocol methodology, then you might see a world where you post on one of them and you can actually access that post on all of them. And so it might be a very different social media landscape in the future because of that. The other thing to mention here is I don't think X is going away. I think that's pretty low. Like the odds of that are pretty low. But I think it might become more niche. So it might find its particular audience identity that it caters to, which
Absolutely.
I think is what you'll see across all these different social media platforms as we have sort of this more federated network of social media protocols. Those social media protocols can cater more towards specific interests and specific groups rather than being this big public square. Then there might still be a couple that are still the big public square. There might also be several different towns that are all over the place. And, people can get your content in any of those towns. They can get your emails there, but they might really want to tune into just a couple of them and be very focused on being present in those spaces rather than the broader public square.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I know YouTube is one too. You can get on, I believe it's also open protocol, and you can get it in a kind of a feed, which to me, one of the things that's interesting with this, and I don't know that we've seen exactly how it'll work yet. One of the big kind of rules that is going to change that is different in this is the way that advertising works and paid promotions within them. And so I think that's really going to affect what strategies work. And if you're solely reliant upon paid advertising from a social media perspective, then it's not going to work in the same way. And I don't know that that's the right strategy for you. At least not right now. I think it comes back to what makes sense for your brand.
That's a really good point for the Fediverse too, because it's like when you think about it, if we do have this open, kind of protocol social media thing that's decentralized, what stops different platforms like Meta has ads right now? A lot of the big platforms have ads right now. But what stops someone from spinning up something that is on that open protocol that doesn't run ads in the feed?
Yeah.
Then that's a whole different game.
Exactly.
So I think that gets at a really interesting thing where there might be sort of a new type of advertising, because when you let's keep going down this email rabbit hole of kind of using that as the metaphor. So if we take that as the metaphor here and we say, okay, it's like email. Email marketing is still a thing, but how do you get through with email marketing?
Exactly.
You have to get past the spam filter. You have to, be relatively authentic. You have to try and provide value to people, things like that. The same principles apply of
Love that.
I'm not big in email marketing, but those are the things that I've seen work is, providing actual value to people in an email will actually allow you to keep that, people will actually want that in your inbox. Like, oh yeah, I like when I get that email, rather than,
Absolutely.
oh yeah, it's that kind of spammy email that I get every day.
Completely. And it gives them and just like email, they can unsubscribe if they no longer like what you're serving them because it is too spammy. But if you're showing up with content that they really like and is engaging and adding value, it's a good, you can have the potential to get a lot of growth through it. I love that email analogy. It's so good.
Anything to add here before we move on?
Do we answer Threads? Yeah, I think Threads is really, it continues to hang on. I mean, yeah, I kind of look at it as similar to a Blue Sky in that it might be worth testing, and there's benefits to being an early adopter if it fits for you, but it is still kind of like juvenile. It's a young platform, so we don't know exactly how successful it's going to be. I wouldn't put all your eggs in the basket of it in the chance that it doesn't get the growth it needs. Or, I mean, Meta's been known to invest a lot into trying something and then just pulling the plug one day. So Threads for me makes me a little more nervous than Blue Sky, because Blue Sky, it's their one thing. If they pull the plug, they lose everything, kind of. But Threads does have that benefit of having the established meta universe. So yeah, yeah. And they're kind of similar. You could kind of, I haven't tested this, so this is just off the top of my head, but maybe there's potential, like the content that works on Blue Sky, if it works on Threads, maybe you can post in both places and see which works better. But yeah.
Yeah, I think, doing as much as you can do to figure out what works there. Um, there also is probably in this, there's Blue Sky right now. If this whole Fediverse thing plays out the way that it might play out, it does make a lot of sense to get there early and start doing your quote unquote email marketing early on so that you're on that open protocol and you're actually doing those posts early and getting that exposure early on in the protocol. Because if more places just start to adopt this protocol, you're effectively able to be on one social media platform that allows you to show up on many different social media platforms.
Yeah. And you can reserve your handle, get a handle that you like.
Actually, yeah, there is a whole different thing with Blue Sky and handles too. I think you can route it to like your own URL and things like that.
Yeah.
So it is,
There's a lot. Yeah.
yeah.
It's a lot more technically complex sometimes in some ways as a user.
You'll see that it is a different type of platform because it kind of literally is a different type of platform being part of this decentralized social media movement. And one of the things too to add just to kind of contextualize how Blue Sky was made, because I think this makes a lot of sense when you hear it. Blue Sky was born out of Twitter back in the Jack Dorsey days. And really the reason why it's called Blue Sky is because it's supposed to be the Twitter bird flying out into the blue sky. So thinking of it as kind of like the next iteration of social media and kind of this more open, free platform where people can kind of just actually post without the platform being able to dictate so much of what you can do.
Yeah.
Do you think, is it user friendly enough that it could become mainstream?
It's getting pretty close.
I think it'll get there. Seeing some of the stuff they're doing.
I haven't looked in a while, but when I looked a number of months ago, I was kind of like, oh, I'm not sure, like one of my parents would be able to figure this out, or
Yeah. Yeah. I would say it's getting better. It still can be kind of confusing, but it's getting there. And I know that they're working on some new tools to hopefully implement some new things like video feeds. Yeah, I think they're making progress towards it. They would be silly to not be because it's finally gaining that growth. Yeah. I would still say I think it would still, I mean, my mom's confused by Facebook. So love my mom, but
One other thing to mention here too is there is this thing called starter packs on Blue Sky. So if you do end up going there, you can use these starter packs to get those initial so like I think it's like you go to a creator's profile and they might have a starter pack for certain things and they can follow that and it gives them a bunch of different useful content that they might enjoy. It's like
Yeah.
it's kind of like a recommendations thing. It's like these are my recommended follows.
yeah. And I think, and that is something that can be a benefit as an earlier adopter. That is the sort of thing that if you get in there and you can kind of be like, hey, let me help you get established by following these 5 accounts that I really like and think are great, and they're all mine, that's going to help you grow a lot. And it helps you kind of, that was, I think, I got on Blue Sky way early and was like, who do I follow? Which makes you kind of get bored and then you leave because I was just seeing posts I didn't really care. Yeah. So the starter packs is something that I think is going to really help grow.
And it's going to facilitate something that's really interesting where the early, really big profiles on the account or on Blue Sky that people start to love, those accounts are probably going to get disproportionately included in the early starter packs, which means when people jump into those starter packs, they get even more attention. And actually, we talked a lot about the algorithm and this interest media versus social media. We might actually go back to the point where followers are a lot more important because followers is kind of like who you subscribe to, and who you unsubscribe to is who you don't like. When you don't follow someone, you will be following and unfollowing probably a lot more with these open protocols.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point too, especially like its algorithm is younger and less complex, and it is more like followers is a better indicator of who's doing well or not, because it's still grounded in actual human beings doing actual actions. Whereas Meta, you can buy 1 million followers if you want, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's actually one other thing that we should probably mention before we move on from this one is the algorithms are changeable on a lot of those open protocols too. So it's like how you can sort your email inbox in different ways. You can do that with different protocols or different like platforms. Like Blue Sky's one platform, but you could have in this open protocol Fediverse, you could have multiple different platforms that all use different algorithms, and people might flock to the algorithm they prefer the most. All right. Ready to move on from this one? Okay. Questions for the audience? 1, are you on Blue Sky? And then 2, is this something that interests you? Are you interested in the Fediverse? Do you think you might use it in the future? And just a third one to throw in here. What are your odds on the Fediverse? Do you think it's likely? Do you think it's unlikely? Let us know, because I'm very curious what other people think of this. All right. So now we've got our new segment here, which I'm very excited for. What's got your attention? So this is kind of a open show and tell type thing. I don't think we'll have time today to bring audience in, but I think one of the things we want to do in future versions of this is bring the audience members in, have them come on, call in and stuff, and tell us what's got your attention. So it's pretty simple. What is something that's got your attention? And then the second question is, how might you leverage that in a business? All right, you are up, Emily. This is your
Woohoo.
what's got your attention.
So this is something I think in the topic of, should we be on Blue Sky? Should I try these new platforms? This was an example of a very in my opinion, thoughtfully and well done strategy from the Washington State Department of Transportation to test out Blue Sky and how they made the move and navigating doing this as a government agency in a time where platforms are politicized, and being on one versus the other has implications. But at the same time, you're an entity who exists to give people information so that they can stay safe and get to work or wherever they're traveling to. So they're in a position where it's complicated to be there or not to be there. And I thought that they did a really excellent job of testing it and sharing their plan this is from their social media manager, who is just incredible. And she shared basically, this is how we're choosing to do this. And I mean, I think it's an A+ case study in making an announcement when you do a move like this, which I wouldn't say is always. A lot of times I'm like, nobody cares. Don't announce when you have a new thing, because you're excited you have a new website, but nobody else really cares unless it drastically changes their experience. But in this case, with the political context and the fact it is kind of a public safety concern, it is important, and they did an excellent job announcing it. And they basically, the components to their announcement is they're sharing why they are even considering this, and the fact that it is making their job really hard, and they're not getting the traction that they used to get on X, and are now considering, maybe we need to try this new tool. And then they reestablish their credibility of the fact that they've been there over I think they said nearly 2 decades on Twitter, which is kind of mind blowing. And really sharing, like, this is how we even chose Blue Sky. And you can see they go through Mastodon, Threads. Blue Sky is where they're landing. And then they establish their timeline and their plan. We're going to try it for 6 months and assess. Yeah, I'm someone who's in the weeds a little bit, so there's a lot of information there that I think probably other people might not care as much, but I thought it was a really well done, professional, with the implications. Just showing up could have caused a lot of like political backlash and fervor and people reading into it negatively or positively, and this kind of sets the stakes of it's practical. This is why we're doing it. So yeah, these are just screenshots. You can see that they have a lot of sub accounts for specific regions and things. And this is the same as what they have on their Twitter as well. They have these same accounts. And I mean, from a user perspective, it's really similar across the two platforms. So similar experience here. And as you mentioned, the starter packs, that is something that they did right out the gate. And I think has helped clarify and really kick off what they're doing. Like it's a really smart use of something that's in Blue Sky, which shows they know the platform and they're using it in a thoughtful way. And that's the top, one of the top pinned things is check out our starter pack, give these accounts a follow. And you can see it got a lot of engagement, more than like anything recently on Twitter. And then on the next page, so I wanted to do a little tiny case study.
One thing I want to add there is what's really interesting here with the starter packs. I think that might show up across more social media platforms. If that's really getting traction, I think you're going to start to see the different other platforms start to use the same thing.
Yeah.
So that might be an interesting thing to think about, is how you would leverage starter packs, who would be in your starter pack, how might you be able to get into other people's starter packs if that does become a thing on multiple social media channels.
Yeah, something that I would say the closest thing to it that at least the first thing, one of the things that comes to mind to me that has a similar sort of purpose as an end user is something that Messenger has been working on, of being able to make kind of like subscription groups and like private groups that you can be invited to by creators, or I think there's paid subscriptions you can be on, but it is something that could be, hey, this is our group and it's us in our 5 sub accounts and we're going to be on here for XYZ and we're going to add these followers or whatever. And it is sort of like it's a similar purpose to get you engaged with specific accounts. But yeah, I think that's a good point.
X does have something that's directionally this way, but it's not customizable, so you don't actually get to pick who's in there. But like if you follow an account on X, then it pops up this thing, it says other people followed, and it kind of shows all these different people that you might want to follow too. All right. On to the next page. There we go.
So yeah, I wanted to do a little test. They've been on here for 2 months now. How's the performance on X versus Blue Sky? Which I should have labeled it. On the left is Blue Sky, right is Twitter or X. And just it's not totally comprehensive, but just taking a look at some of their recent posts. Again, functionally, you can see they're very similar. They've already gotten up to 14,000 followers. You can see on Twitter, they got a lot more. They have almost 400,000 followers. And you can see this was, I think, one of their latest posts. There was a traffic issue and they share, as they said, the same posts on each platform. And kind of similar, they got a little bit more engagement on X. Makes sense. I can't do the math off the top of my head, but it's like more than 10 times, 20 times the followers on X, which as someone who's been a manager, it's really frustrating. This would be something where I'd be like, okay, our follower to engagement ratio is way better on Blue Sky. And that's something that is encouraging for the Blue Sky side. But yeah, you can see functionally, they did get more engagement, and you can't see the reach numbers on the Blue Sky, but that's something behind the scenes. As someone trying to promote a message, I'd be kind of curious what the difference is between the two platforms. But from an engagement perspective, pretty equal, which is encouraging based on them having 14,000 followers on Blue Sky. But we'll see. And from the another post, which I thought was interesting because it was a video post, and that is something they got nearly more than double the engagement on Blue Sky versus X with this video post. And that's something that I think is interesting. I see it as potentially the result of Blue Sky working to try to diversify the types of content that's in their feed. They released, I don't know how long ago, a few months ago, they finally had the ability to have longer video. First, it was just video content to begin with, and then it was longer form video. And so that is something that I would guess that they're going to be kind of encouraging and getting more traction on the platform. So if you can do more video content, I'm guessing it's going to continue to have more engagement on the platform, at least for now. But yeah, so little case study. This was the trend I saw generally. pretty equal performance based on their follower size, but encouraging to know that they could get on and grow on Blue Sky, and video seems to be a good strategy right now. And that's what I saw from here.
That's great. It's really interesting to see just the level of engagement there for the follower count.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Yes.
you've got your more dedicated fans. I mean, it's more recent, so it makes sense. Like these are the people who moved over to Blue Sky, whereas that account's been going on X for probably a while. But it'll be interesting to watch how this grows too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, like, I think they've established their media strategy and their comms strategy to make sense on a platform like Twitter, X, Blue Sky, etc. So it really made sense for them to test it. And I mean, you could initially kind of think traffic on Twitter, but yeah, that's something that people go for timely news and information. And yeah, I think it makes sense.